Good evening. Tonight, we are investigating the startling evolution of a man who was once labeled the unlikely face of classical music. When Jonathan Antoine first stepped onto a global stage over a decade ago, he was a shy teenager fighting a battle none of us could see. Today, the headlines surrounding the tenor are no longer just about his vocal range, but about a series of personal revelations that have left his global fanbase in a state of shock and empathy. From life-altering health diagnoses to a physical transformation that has rendered him nearly unrecognizable to the casual viewer, the latest updates on Jonathan Antoine are a testament to the heavy price of early fame. We are breaking down the timeline of these events to understand why the world is currently rallying behind a man who has finally decided to speak his truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be for the industry that created him. It wasn't just stage fright. It was a lifelong mystery that finally found a name. For years, the public watched Jonathan struggle with intense anxiety, often assuming it was the standard pressure of the spotlight. However, the news that surfaced recently has forced us to reevaluate every performance we've ever seen. Jonathan revealed that at the age of 27, he was officially diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. This wasn't just a medical label. It was a radical shift in his identity that explained the internal chaos he felt while the world was cheering for him. In news circles, this is being seen as a monumental moment for neurodivergence in the arts. Jonathan described the revelation as a scary reckoning, a moment where the puzzle pieces of his childhood, the isolation, the sensory overload, and the feeling of being an outsider, finally clicked into place. He admitted that for a long time, he felt like he was playing a character of himself. This diagnosis allowed him to stop apologizing for his differences and start advocating for them. Fans have been moved to tears not because of the diagnosis itself, but because of the sheer weight Jonathan had to carry in silence while the industry demanded he remain a perfect performer. It raises a serious question about the duty of care in reality television. How many other young stars are currently navigating similar mental hurdles without the proper support? Jonathan's honesty has opened a floodgate of conversation regarding mental health, and his willingness to be vulnerable about his late-blooming self-awareness has solidified him as more than just a singer. He's become a beacon for those who feel they don't fit the traditional mold of a superstar. The man we see on screen today is a shadow of his former self, but in the most literal sense possible. Perhaps the most visually jarring update in Jonathan's life is his staggering physical transformation, a journey that saw him shed over 5 stone in a relatively short window. For a performer whose image was once tied to his larger-than-life presence, this change wasn't about vanity. It was a desperate response to a health crisis. Reports indicate that during his time living in the United States, Jonathan's health hit a critical low point. Surrounded by the convenience of fast food and the sedentary lifestyle that often accompanies intense recording sessions, he realized he was on a dangerous path. He described his previous condition as a terrible state, hinting at the physical toll that depression and poor habits had taken on his stamina. The news of his weight loss wasn't met with just praise, but with a deep concern for the discipline required to maintain such a change. Jonathan has been candid about the sinking feelings he faced during this period, clarifying that there were no shortcuts or quick fixes involved. It was a grueling regimen of 10,000 steps a day and a total mental rewiring regarding his relationship with food. To many, this transformation symbolizes a shedding of the BGT boy persona. He is no longer the teenager who hid behind his hair and his size. He is a man who has taken radical ownership of his longevity. While some fans worry that the change might affect his famous vocal power, Jonathan has reassured the public that he feels stronger and more resonant than ever before. This physical rebirth serves as a stark reminder that the journey to health is often paved with internal battles that the public rarely sees until the results are too dramatic to ignore. The fairy-tale ending that millions of fans were waiting for has officially been laid to rest. For over a decade, the names Jonathan and Charlotte were inseparable, a duo that defined a generation of crossover classical music. But as we look at the trajectory of their lives in 2026, the reality is far more somber than the reunion rumors suggested. Despite constant speculation, and won't they headlines, the professional and personal ties between the two have been definitively severed. Sources close to the situation suggest that while there is no active feud, the two have simply evolved into two different species of artists. Jonathan has leaned heavily into his solo identity, using his music to process his aforementioned personal trials, while Charlotte has moved into a more private, domestic life, away from the glare of the paparazzi. This silent ending has been a source of grief for the fanbase that grew up with them. It's a classic case of the industry trying to freeze two people in time, while reality forces them to grow apart. Jonathan has occasionally touched upon the weight of expectations that came with being half of a duo, implying that the pressure to stay together was often stifling for his own artistic growth. The news that they no longer communicate as they once did is the final nail in the coffin for the 2012 nostalgia era. It serves as a poignant lesson in the transience of fame. Sometimes the very things that launch us into the stratosphere are the same things we must leave behind to survive as individuals. The tears fans are shedding today aren't just for the loss of a musical act, but for the realization that the innocent era of Britain's Got Talent has moved into a much more complex and isolated reality for its former stars. Even for a man who has seen it all, the start of 2026 brought a level of personal heartbreak that almost silenced his voice for good. In the world of entertainment news, we often focus on the charts and the tour, but for Jonathan Antoine, the real story has always been his emotional support system. In a series of updates that trended globally, Jonathan shared the devastating loss of his two lifelong companions, his cats, Polly and Pandora. To some, this might seem like a minor footnote, but for Jonathan, who has spoken at length about how animals helped him navigate the sensory world of his neurodivergence, this was a catastrophic blow. He spent nearly 20 years with these animals. They were the silent witnesses to his rise, his fall, and his eventual recovery. This period of mourning coincided with his latest musical release, All of Me, which many are interpreting as a raw, unfiltered response to his current state of mind. The single, released in early 2026, marks a departure from the produced sound of his earlier career. It's a more stripped-back, vulnerable approach that highlights the cracks in his voice, cracks that represent his recent losses and his battle with the darker side of his mind. There is a sense of finality in his current messaging, leading some to speculate if he is preparing for a significant hiatus or a total rebrand. However, the outpouring of support from fans has been unprecedented. They aren't just buying the music. They are sending messages of solidarity to a man who has become a symbol of resilience. As Jonathan moves forward, the latest news isn't just about a singer releasing a song. It's about a man who has survived the loss of his youth, his partners, and his anchors, and is still standing at the microphone, ready to tell the world exactly who he is, without the mask. As we close this report, the story of Jonathan Antoine remains one of the most compelling narratives in modern music. He is no longer the boy who shocked Simon Cowell, but a man who has shocked the world with his capacity for change and his commitment to the truth. Whether he is navigating the complexities of a new diagnosis or the grief of a personal loss, he continues to prove that his true talent isn't just in his throat, but in his heart. As he embarks on this next chapter of 2026, we are left to wonder, what else will this new Jonathan reveal? We will be watching closely as this story continues to unfold.